I guess we are ready to rock and roll. This is Katie Alexander. She is an extension agent from Montrose County. So we'll welcome Katie and hear about soil health.
Yay. All right, well, you guys are going to have to bear with me. It has probably been over 2 years since I have done any type of public speaking engagement, so I am definitely a little rough. It's kind of scary, right? So I was going to talk about Soil Health 101. I'm housed down in the Montrose Friendship Hall office for CSU. I'm the small acreage and marketing position down there, but I work for the Tri-River area, so I work in Mesa, Delta, Montrose, and a little bit of San Miguel and Uray counties as well with those producers. Have fairly strong background in soils, working for the NRCS for over 13 years. I helped put in a lot of irrigation projects, have a lot of on-ground projects in the Montrose and Delta areas. So soil health has become a passion of mine, having watched a lot of the agriculture within our area change over the years. So let's see, we need a clicker. Cool. Haha, yay. Okay, so what is soil health? So according to the USDA NRCS, it is the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem. So to me, pretty much that means that it is the soil's ability to function for both biological, physical, and chemical processes and traits. All right, so this is a lovely picture from the 1930s during the Dust Bowl. Isn't that a gorgeous photo? Yeah, I really like it. So the 1930s was when the Soil Conservation Service, which is now known as the NRCS, was created. It's also when the conservation districts were created. There was a day there where Hugh Hammond Bennett was in Washington, D.C. He was addressing Congress, and one of these dust bowls happened to roll in, and they got to see it firsthand. It came from the Midwest, clear to Washington, D.C., so they got to experience what they had been. In this picture over here on the right, you can see it's a little bit more recent, but it's really not that much better, is it? There's a lot of water erosion going on there. And so we have a long way to go, I think, personally, in improving our farming practices in some areas. Stanford estimates that we lose roughly 1% of our topsoil in the United States. Depending on what agronomist you want to argue with, that's roughly 5 tons per acre of soil that is lost. And I'm talking, conventional farming, those numbers. You do have, minute amounts of soil erosion being lost on permanent pasture systems that are natural. I mean, we have natural erosion through wind and water, right? But we could definitely do better in our farming practices. Okay, so this is where soil health comes in. The 5 principles of soil health are to minimize disturbance, maximize soil cover, maximize biodiversity, maximize the presence of living soil or living roots in the soil, and livestock integration. Rudy Garcia, he works for the NRCS down in New Mexico, I believe, still. I think he used to be the soil or the state agronomist, but I think he's a regional soil health specialist now. He did this picture over here. If you blow it up and you want to sit there and study it and read it and make sure you understand it, it's pretty much the soil food web over here. I like the soil food web because it's simplified. But I like to also include this one so you guys kind of understand how complicated our soils are. And we really don't know a ton about our soils. We probably know more about the moon and the ocean than we do about all the microorganisms and the interactions that are going on in our soil under our feet currently. Okay, so let's go with principle number 1 with minimizing the disturbance. Most everybody thinks in traditional agriculture, mold bore plowing, and that really did revolutionize the United States as a country. It was a great invention, but now we need to kind of stretch our minds and think about some other things to help protect our soil so that we're not losing it. And first right off the bat is to minimize disturbance. And so here we have an example of some no-till, minimum till that goes on within the valley, and these are actually in Montrose Delta area. These pictures are taken here, where they've left stubble and stuff on the fields for protection. So this obviously protects from wind and water erosion, but what is another way that we can minimize our disturbance? For cattle ranchers, that's not overgrazing. If we can keep the plants there, not overgrazed, not explode so that soil, it helps protect it. It also limits the plant's ability to produce CO2 and those exudates and stuff that go down into the soil, those cookies that the microorganisms like to eat that help produce the glues that hold our soil in place. So if we overgraze, that's bad, right? Another thing that also people don't think about in helping to minimize disturbance is making sure that we follow our nutrient and our pesticide recommendations. When we over-fertilize, we disrupt that soil food web that was in that last slide there and mess it up. Just like the last presentation where he was talking about if we put oil down the drains, it kills the bacteria in the treatment plants, right? It's not a good thing to do. Okay. This next picture, this is a couple examples of the equipment that's been slowly coming into the valley. As we all know, farm equipment's not cheap. And so in the last 10 to 12 years, with the improvements that I've seen a lot of our farmers in the Montrose and Delta area making, was bringing in some of this type of equipment. Up here in the corner, this is Willie Forgetto's Landall machine that he uses. And then this one right here, this one is in Loma Fruta area. A gentleman by the name of Lowell King, him and his brothers brought that in. I got to actually see that machine last week. It is really cool. It uses pads where the seeds come down instead of air to suck in and then drop the seed into the hole as the no-till drill goes across the soil. And so it can accommodate a wide variety of different seed sizes so that you can plant different seed mixes when you move into cover crops, which I'll talk about a little bit here later into the presentation. Another really cool feature about this piece of equipment is, hey, Katie, we furrow irrigate in most of Delta, Montrose, and Mesa counties. Almost all of our irrigation's furrow irrigation, right, on 30-inch beds. This machine right here, if you can see, there's a gap there. You can't really see it at the angle right there. There's gaps there. And so when he drags that no-till planter down through his field, he's not planting in the furrow. He's planting 4 strips on that 30-inch bed center, and there's a little piece in there that's moving the trash that might be in the way of the furrow out, and it is successfully working for him. Lowell King has been probably doing soil health in the Fruta Loma area for 5 to 6 years now. And one of the things that he said they struggled with when they first started using these no-till planters was the silt building up as the water went down the furrow and causing a dam and flushing the bed and eroding it out. Now that they have increased their biodiversity within their soil, their microorganisms are healthier. Those exudates of those microorganisms are they secrete a glue, holds those soil particles together. Their beds are no longer washing out and across the field as they irrigate. It's all staying stable. And he farms probably, he said I think it was around 500 acres. They just installed their first center pivot this year, his brother did, and they actually really like it. But they're finding that it is possible to irrigate and do soil health on furrow irrigations. That's probably one of the biggest limiting factors to producers in our areas. What do we do about irrigating and getting the water down the rows? All right, so our next principle is maximizing soil cover and putting soil armor on to protect it. I've had several soil scientists describe to me that imagine you're the Wicked Witch to the west or east, and you have the house land on top of you. That is what a soil of grain feels when a raindrop falls on top of it. That is the impact. And so you take that into mind, and that's why we need to help protect it, because that's what dislodges it and moves it across. This is Greg Catlin's property down in Montrose. He's a sweet corn producer in our area. About 7 or 8 years ago, when the NRCS was working with these producers, they had been kind of complaining about the quality of the sweet corn not tasting as good. And they related that back to their soils and their soils not being as nutritious as they had been. And so about 6 years ago, we came up with the idea of attaching a seed spreader to the back of the field corn, or the sweet corn topper. So as the sweet corn topper goes through the field, that cover crop seed's getting spread, and then the harvest crews would come in and they would step in the seed as they're picking the sweet corn, and they would irrigate it. And again, the irrigation didn't always reach the bottom of the field, but they did get enough on so that you could germinate these cover crop mixes. And so this is an example of one of those. It's kind of like fun little soldiers in my mind because of the way the rows look. And so that's the cover crop growing right there in that sweet corn. And as you can see, this is a close-up photo of it. And one really important thing to keep in mind is, so now they've come in, they've harvested their cash crop, but they also have additional grazing for their livestock. And I will tell you, you can make these cover crops so rich that they're like the protein tubs that you guys throw out in the fields for your cattle to lick. And you can make the cow's stomachs upset. So you do have to watch them, right? Another thing that we also have to pay attention to is prussic or nitrate poisoning. And so you do take clippings of these cover crops and send them in for analysis. And you also have to pay attention to when freezes hit and stuff because of the prussic acid increasing that might cause poisoning to livestock. However, this is amazing supplement grazing for livestock. And I mean, who would much rather eat a yummy turnip or a dried old corn stalk, right? It's important to think about that kind of stuff. Okay, so maximize biodiversity. So this is where we move into the discussion a little bit about the cover crops. The cover crops that the area down in Montrose has been trying typically is anywhere between a 6 and an 8-way mix. When I visited with Lowell King last week, he had like a 10-way mix out there. So the different species and the different types of things growing can really make an impact in your soil. This is an example of triticale, sorghum Sudan, radishes, turnips, and vetch. And each one of these different species is either like a C4 or C3 plant. So it means they're warm season or cool season, and they're either grasses or broadleaves. And you can tailor these mixes to meet different goals for you. Lowell King was discussing last week that he had some really rich fields that he'd rather move some yearlings through to gain their weight versus the mama cows, which he was maintaining those. I mean, there's some goals that you can kind of set and stuff, and when you want to graze and use these different fields as a producer, and you're paying attention to that kind of stuff that we're still trying to work out and find the answers to. How much time do I have left? 5 minutes. Okay, I'll hurry. I'm sorry. I will jibber jabber forever. All right, so maximize the presence of living roots in the soil. So the longer we have living roots in the soil, the healthier our soil web is that we saw on that slide earlier at the beginning. Obviously we're up in Gunnison and Montrose. We still have winter, so things slow down. But you still have microbiology that's moving around a little bit even in the dead of winter here. One of the pictures that I really love right here that's mycorrhizal fungi. So that's a symbiotic relationship between a legume plant, which I think that's a pea, and bacteria. That bacteria fixes nitrogen, it pulls it out from the atmosphere and gives it to the plant in exchange for cookies or carbon, right? And so they have a really neat relationship. So next year when that plant dies and is broken down into the soil, there's additional fertilizer there for whatever cash crop the producer grows. Livestock integration. And so like I was talking about grazing earlier, example of cows love radishes and turnips. They think they're like candies and cookies to them. Also included a picture of a honeybee for pollinators. Actually, some of these cover crop mixes that they're growing in the Midwest, they're beautiful. They're gorgeous when they all bloom. But they all have their place for pollinators. Okay, so I was going to do a quiz, but since I had 5 minutes, I thought maybe instead I would take questions. Oh, come on, guys. I didn't do that good of a job. Surely somebody has a question. Yes?
This isn't a question.
Yes.
Since you were kind of against ranchers,
I'm not against ranchers. No, I love cows and stuff. Absolutely not.
overgraze, we have to sustain, that's the word.
Yes, absolutely.
Year after year.
Yep.
So it just sounded,
Oh, no. I have cows myself. Absolutely not against ranching. I'm sorry if I made that innuition. No. I just, we need to think about that kind of stuff and make sure we're paying attention to it. And is you guys being up in Gunnison, I know you guys don't have much row cropping and stuff, so kind of talking about options that you might have available for you guys to improve your soil health is not as easy. But I just want to let you guys know what they're doing down in Montrose and stuff. So, yeah, no, definitely not against cattle. Absolutely not. Yes. Oh yes, it would make the milk taste. Absolutely. Yep. So that's what I was talking about. There's things to kind of consider and pay attention to. You know, that sorghum Sudan grass, it's a really good grazer, but when it freezes, you can kill cows on it if they get too much of the acid in them. Absolutely. So there's things you need to pay attention to. But overall, when we were doing some kind of trials and studies with some of the people that were dabbling with the cover crops down in Montrose, overall their mamas and their babies were healthier, and they produced, the babies put on weight after they were born more quickly than just a cow standing out, or a cow and a calf out in a field that was just corn stalks too, and which stands to make sense because there's more nutrients available to them. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. A lot of it's a timing issue and just paying attention to it. The nitrates haven't been so big of a problem, especially when you have the more diverse mix, because they can kind of pick and choose between like the radishes and the oats or the grass species that might have the nitrate buildup in them. I think where you need to pay more attention is to when you have freezes and stuff, and that prussic acid is is in the Sudan grass, right? You know, I'm not sure. It's been a little while since I've actually looked at that kind of data. I'd have to look it back up for you. So, I'm a little rough. It's been a while. Any other questions? Yeah. You know, that is something that I would work with Lowell King on, or so the problem when you come into soil health is a lot of producers and farmers, we think year to year because of prices and commodity crops. And when you talk to Lowell, he's starting to have to think about his crop rotations even 4 or 5 years out and what he's going to be doing, because your management style absolutely changes. Those turnips and those radishes, if you have them in those types of mixes, they, for the most part, in our experience, have disintegrated to nothing because they freeze over the winter and then they rot in the ground. Then it comes into dealing with some of the other stuff. I know some people have tried roller crimping, and that's been pretty unsuccessful. When you go out to some of those fields, they've just left it and used that machine that Lowell King had and that those no-till planters and planted right over the top of it. And you can dig down into the bed and find the root balls of corn plants that were 2 or 3 years old that they're still breaking down, but they're still having success in having germination of their cash crop come in. So if they did corn again, or if they did some type of grain or oats, wheat. So. Yeah? Yes, sir.
So on these fields where they're grazing cattle now,
Yeah.
have they found a decrease as far as the need for synthetic fertilizers because of the livestock interaction?
That's a difficult subject to wean farmers off of synthetic fertilizers. And the other side of that is, because soil health is so, I don't want to say it's not new, but because we don't have the studies and the information behind it, quantifying a lot of what nutrients are left behind. We know that, if you put nitrogen down, you grow your corn crop, and then you plant a cover crop out there, the cows eat and poop. That cover crop pulls some of that nitrogen that got washed below the root zones back up. It pulls nitrogen, potassium, and other micronutrients back up. So there is nutrients available that's being brought back up to the surface. And one of the things, as soil health moves forward, I'd like to see if we can do studies to quantify that amount. So the question is, how much? And I know people are still absolutely fertilizing, which, I wouldn't risk a cash crop on that, absolutely not. I'd still fertilize. And so taking soil test results, studying and learning more about the Haney, there's a Haney soils test, there's Solvita burst tests, and developing better technology so that we can quantify that, I think, is where we need to move to in the future. Yep. Okay, you guys, you've let me jabber long enough. Thank you.